Hello everyone. This, if you aren't familiar with this series, is yet another installation of so-and-so might have a point. Or does have a point in this case. In this case, it's UJames1978. It could have been Varmint Coyote. To you two, it's not anything personal. I'm going after the arguments, or in this case, I'm going to take the point that you have made and I'm going to beat you over the head with it. Because it's a perfectly valid point, and therefore a legitimate weapon. In this case, the one thing that unequivocally the two of you have said is that pedophiles are not necessarily child molesters. Now, regardless of the responses that you've gotten, this is true. They are not necessarily child molesters, and child molesters are not necessarily pedophiles. That being said, or as some of my friends would say, but and however, this is not a point in your favor, because the other reasons that one sees child molesters doing their thing, and let me say that among many of our other ills, child molestation is something that brings out a tremendous variety of motives, that displays them, I should say. I'm not going to go into graphic detail here because, one, I lack personal experience of this, and two, this is YouTube and a public forum. I have no desire to share at that level. There is the idea of power. There is the idea of deflowering innocence, or fulfilling innocence, some might say, or fulfilling the purpose of innocence. There are all sorts of fucked up reasons why one, and not necessarily fucked up, but out there, and I will explain why in a moment, why one would seek sexual congress with a prepubescent child. Fortunately, I'm not familiar with any of them, in either capacity. But the one thing they all have in common is the child. Or even if you're going to talk about someone who's attracted to teenagers, an incompletely formed human being. And while there is no completion date on a human being, one could say that the upper bound would be at around 30 when the forebrain finishes forming, and the lower bound would be at around the end of hormonal adolescence, when things start to calm down in hormonally just a little bit, and people no longer start acting as if a pair of missing sunglasses is on a par with the disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa's body, or Jimmy Hoffa for that matter. So why is that a problem? Why then is the idea of an age of consent law, to me, a fairly sane thing? Why is definitely excluding prepubescent children from sexual congress an excellent idea? Why is this an excellent idea? Well, one, from the child's sake, the child is not fully formed. The child has not yet learned, for lack of a better word, boundaries. What is the distinction between that person over there and me? And in what way does my feelings about that person have nothing to do with what that person over there is actually feeling? It's an important lesson to learn, and one which most victims of molestation and abuse have a difficult time learning. Not only that, but, and that's just one example, but I really want to step back away from the individual child here and think about the societies in which child abuse what we modern call child abuse, or what we in modern times call child abuse, or what might have been called the special relationship between an elder and a younger person, or even in some countries in Europe, normal heterosexual marriage, even though they didn't have the term heterosexual yet. And what you had, the prerequisite was you had an elder, even if as gently and as luxuriously as possible, imposing their will, imposing their desires upon someone who was not old enough to have fully formed opinions about how they felt about anything having to do with sex. And therefore was not really able to resist it. They might resist it in a way that made it unsatisfactory for the elder, but they certainly could not actively oppose that which was being done in any meaningful fashion beyond physical violence, and the consequences of that would be quite dire. So what you have in these societies like Sparta, like medieval Italy, like much of the Middle Ages, where it was common for, the other common occurrence of children marrying were marriages arranged by the family, in which case, once again, it is the older generation placing their will upon the younger one. It's just they're doing it as a twofer, rather than one at a time. But it should be noted that in that case, it was more often noble families, because it was important that the family unions be arranged as quickly as possible, and that, shall we say, those bargains were struck while the currency was still well before its sell-by date. That currency being the children. So you have, again, feudalism, despotism, arbitrary adherence to tradition, and as the model of violent child abuse teaches us, or even religion, since people are likely to be, are most likely to be in the religion they grew up in, we do to children as we are done to, as children. And so, what this does is reinforce the idea that the elders are to be served. The elders are to be respected. The elders are the ones making the decisions. When in the past 200 years our greatest progress has been made, especially in mathematics, especially in the sciences, especially in many ways in philosophy. Well, hell, a lot of ways in philosophy. In many, many fucking ways. By challenging and opening up our beliefs to challenge, we have progressed a great deal farther as a species and as people. We have come out as better people, I believe. This is a prejudiced point of view, and any cultural anthropologist will call me on it. However, you know, I gotta argue from somewhere. And really, the consequences of not speaking out in a society where speaking out is at least somewhat valued, because really we are a conformist society at heart, and a conformist species perhaps, is much, much less than the consequences of speaking out in a society that values conformity. As any atheist in Iran can tell you. Just saying. So, regardless of the entire fact that not all pedophiles are child molesters, I see no reason why, given all the other dangers and ways, the two children, given all the other ways they are molested, and I'm not saying protect them and insulate them from the world, I'm just saying all the other ways that people find joy in interrupting their progress as developing, their progress in developing as individual human beings, I see no reason to cater to the desires of people who simply have desires and designs upon people who are not fully formed yet. And seriously, I see this issue as so much, and I'm sorry this is a little incoherent. It's 95 degrees out here and I'm a little wobbly. But if you feel these desires are so important that they override this multi-layered set of consequences to what you propose, which are not necessary, well, which certainly have been repeated throughout history. I mean, look at the Amish, look at the Hasid community in Brooklyn, look at the priests in the Catholic Church. I am not saying that child molestation is endemic to these institutions, but it certainly is present to a larger degree in these very hierarchical societies. So, as someone who loves freedom, as the two of you do, I have to question why you would champion something that so actively suppresses it when it must be nurtured, and that is in childhood. Just a question for you all. To the rest of you, thank you for your time and attention.